Shalom and welcome to Biblical Faith with Sam Peak. We invite you to join us as Sam brings a study in the Torah from the Jewish sages. And now our speaker, Sam Peak.
Go.
I made stupid people. He really did.
Shalom Aleichem. This class always starts on some very, very high note or some, something. Okay, well, we'll get down to business as quick as we can here. Maybe. Anyway, I'm very glad to see all of you. I'm very glad that you're really dedicated to studying the Torah and to coming closer to Hashem. That's really and truly what everything is all about. That's what our study here is all about, and that's what we want to do. We've been studying Pirkei Avot at the request of Pat, and she released me from that, so, we may get a little farther along. I find a place to stop for a minute. We may do some other lessons in the meantime, but I still want to come back and still finish the entire Mishnah or the entire tractate of Pirkei Avot, or the chapter of Pirkei Avot. Anyway, so we've been using a very, very specialized, actually, commentary on it from the Maharal of Prague, as presented in this book from Art Scroll, edited by and put together and translated, actually, by Rabbi Tuvia Basser. And it's always unfortunate to me that I don't have the original. I would really like to have the original Hebrew commentary of the Maharal on this, because he tells us every once in a while that he's leaving stuff out, and going on, and I would really like to see that. But anyway, the commentary itself has been absolutely excellent. Now, we have been, for a while, in, is it chapter 2 of Pirkei Avot? Yeah, the second chapter of Pirkei Avot, in Mishnayot, in the Mishnahs of number 10 through 14. And we're in not such an easy place right now of what the Ramchal, or not the Ramchal, what the Maharal, Rabbi Judah Loew of Prague, what the Maharal is trying to get across to us, because we're in this. Let's read real quickly the Mishnayot, just to bring us up to date, starting chapter 2, Mishnah number 10. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai had 5 primary disciples. They were Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrkanos, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hananiah, Rabbi Yosef HaKohen, Rabbi Shimon ben Netanyel, and Rabbi Elazar ben Arak. And he used to enumerate or count their praises. Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrkanos is like a cemented cistern that loses not a drop. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hananiah, praiseworthy is she who bore him. Rabbi Yosef HaKohen is a scrupulously pious person. He's a chassid. Rabbi Shimon ben Netanel fears sin, and Rabbi Elazar ben Arak is like a spring flowing stronger and stronger. That's his introduction. And then we have the section. I'm not going to read it all. We have the section on which is the greatest, and then we have the section where he tells them to go out and discern which is the good path to which a man should cling, should follow. Rabbi Eliezer says a good eye. Rabbi Yehoshua says a good friend. Rabbi Yosef says a good neighbor. Rabbi Shimon says one who considers the outcome of a deed. Hello, how are you? It's good to see you. Rabbi Elazar says a good heart, lev tov, okay? And then again, he tells which words he prefers. And then he says, and go out and discern what's the evil path from which a man should not be involved with, which he should distance himself. And Rabbi Eliezer, they give the exact opposite of the answers that they said a person should cling to. An evil eye. Rabbi Yehoshua says a wicked friend. Rabbi Yosef says a wicked neighbor. Rabbi Shimon says, interestingly, one who borrows and does not repay. One who borrows from man is like one who borrows from the omnipresent one, as it is said. The wicked one borrows and does not repay, but the righteous one is gracious and gives. And that's a quote from the Psalms. Rabbi Elazar says, a wicked heart. And Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai said to them, I preferred the words of Elazar ben Arak to your words, meaning a wicked heart, for your words are included in his words. Now, what the Maharal did is he sees, if you remember, what we talked about the last time we were together, he sees in these 5 disciples the 5 parts of a soul. Now, immediately, students of Kabbalah go, boom, that's Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, and Yechidah, or Naranchi, okay? Because we've studied this in some Kabbalistic studies. That is not what actually the Maharal is talking about. He's literally talking about the lowest level of Nefesh, all right? And he is dividing within Nefesh 5 parts to it, all right? That's what he's doing. I just say this to remind you. And he divides that into sekel, okay, which he defines as the intellect. And really and truly, this division, now look, this is the way he does it. I'm just going to give all this to you. Let me just poof it out there, and then we'll try to study the Maharal's commentary. So he makes a division between sekel, intellect, and then the word he uses as nefesh. In this case, sekel, which he says is purely spiritual, that is going to be, if we take the pattern of everything, the pattern of all the universes, and the pattern also of a human being, which is the pattern of the 10 sfirot, okay? And because a human being also is built according to this pattern, and even a soul is built according to that pattern. So, like Rabbi Yitzhak Ginsburg says, he calls these, he says, just as there are 10 sfirot, there are also 10 powers of the soul, all right? Those powers of the soul are actually divided between what's called mochin, brains. A moach in Hebrew is brain, so mochin is the brains, or in this case, the term that's being used is sekel, which is the 3 upper sfirot, and then the 7 lower sfirot are the emotive powers of the soul, okay? So in the Maharal system, when he says sekel, this is what he means. The divine part of the soul, if you will. All right? Because we can say that also. That the mochin, the brains, that's the divine part of a soul. And what I mean by that, it doesn't mean that all the rest of your soul isn't coming from God and being made by Him. That's not what I mean, that there's something different there. But it's that part that literally is that part of the connection that understands the Torah. And that's the reason that it can understand the Torah, is because it's the brains, it's the mochin, it's what we would think of as the divine part of the soul. And usually when we speak of nefesh, we only talk about the divine nefesh, or the divine part of nefesh, and the animal part of nefesh. Well, the animal part of nefesh is going to be those 7 lower emotion powers, which they need to be on the bottom. Unfortunately, in the vast majority of people, they're on the top. And this is really can separate us from Hashem in a lot of ways, because it's a real manifestation. The emotion powers of a soul are a real manifestation of the will to receive for ourselves alone. That's what really separates us from Hashem. So when the Maharal says sekel, if we were talking, we would say the mochin, okay, the intellect, the divine part of the soul. When he says the word he uses as nefesh is meaning literally the animal part of a soul, all right, the emotive powers of a soul. Then he takes a term in Hebrew called noseh. Noseh, now Rabbi Basser translates that for us as a link or a support or a way that something expresses itself, all right? And noseh, if I tell you noseh tova, it's the same kind of thing as saying bon voyage. In other words, have a good trip. Because a noseh is to travel, but that is the idea. And what it's about, what the Maharal is showing us, is that it's a part of the nefesh that's in this body. It's the link. There's a link between the sechel and the body. Okay, there's a link between nefesh, or between the animal part of the soul, and the body. And that's what's called nosei. It's the medium, the support, the link between, all right? And then finally he comes to the fifth. So there's two of those. There's sekel and nefesh in his terminology. Divine soul, animal soul, okay? Then there's support, or the expression of that in a physical body. There's a support for the sekel. There's a support or a medium for the animal soul. And then he goes to the source of all of this is lev, a good heart, or lev, just heart, okay? Now, what in the world does that mean? Well, it's a couple of things, actually, and I'm just boiling down a whole lot of stuff, and then I promise you we'll tackle the book in just a second. Lev is going to be actually the unity of the whole five, of all of the other four, okay? Because it's a unity. It exists in a person as a unity. It also has to do, though, with, and this is where a good heart comes in. If you remember back in studying the Kabbalah of Rabbi Ashlag a long time ago, and it's been a long time since we've actually mentioned this, but Rabbi Ashlag, the Baal HaSulam, talks about how, and he's talking about the levels of a soul, those that are with us and that we're totally unconscious of, and then those that are above us, because even though we say there are 5 levels to the soul, Naranchi, we have to actually take those 5 levels and multiply them by mineral, vegetable, animal, speaking spirit. And it comes out to there are hundreds and hundreds of levels of a person's soul. And that coming closer to Hashem, he describes it very clearly. And even though whether we're conscious of this or not, this is exactly what happens, is that there is a point, he says, that is born in you, a point from the next highest level. So like from Nefesh, a point from Ruach, from spirit, is born in you. And that point becomes the source. And what it means is the source for everything that Hashem is putting into us, everything that he is influencing us with. It's actually the source even of life, period. And we really become conscious of it. Well, this also is the idea of Lev, that there is a source point that everything grows out of. Now, we can follow that back up the chain until we finally come to what the Kabbalists call the heart of the universe, which is who? Is God himself. And that really is the source of everything. Okay, all right. So, and I'm also trying to head off a bunch of questions from y'all if y'all are thinking Kabbalistically and we get into this, and the Maharal is using different terminology, okay? So are we okay with the Maharal's terminology? Okay, all right. Oh, Yofi Tofi. Good deal. So we ended actually on page 113. I'm sure of it because I marked the place. I'm sure of it. And so you see there's a chart up at the very top. There's a chart up at the very top where he shows these 5 parts of Nefesh, okay? Intellect, and then he says Nefesh is spirit. Okay. He means something not completely physical, okay? Then support for the spirit, and then support for the intellect, and then he has down at the bottom Lev, heart, which is the source, that point source. It's that connection point. It's the unification of all of them and the source of all of these parts. Okay. He says, he begins and he says, allusions to the structure of the soul. And again, meaning just the nefesh, and you know the nefesh, how do the rabbis say it? It's like the foot. It's like the heel of the soul. In other words, our body is like a shoe. And just the heel of, just the foot of your soul is in this shoe. Okay? Yes, I knew it. Go ahead.
Well, it's a simple question.
Oh, it's a simple question. Okay.
So exactly where in our body is that soul?
Which part? Which part?
The first one.
Sekel?
Yeah.
Sekel is going to be here.
Here.
It's the brains. It's in the brain. Okay. But there is, don't you have the feeling in you, even though you think here, you still have something
here
that comes from you here? Well, see, that's the source. Okay?
Okay.
That's the idea, and that's why it's called Lev. That's why it's called heart. Okay. But now, you know, a soul is so otherworldly that I don't know if I can say exactly this point or exactly that point. And there's a way, you know, and the whole idea also, look, this, we could go on and on and on with this. It's an extremely interesting study, and it's beneficial, but that's like, you know, what does the Torah talk about? It says the nephesh is connected to the blood, okay? Of course it is. So it's connected also there. But now what we don't realize is that the great Ari, the Arizal, comes and says there's more than one kind of blood in your body. Okay? There's the red blood,
And the white.
to which the animal nephesh, the 7 lower powers of the soul are connected to, and that's your red blood. And then there's white blood. And what is he talking about? He's actually talking about the electrical current that runs through your body. It's very, very interesting.
Does that have something to do with white cells?
No, it has something to do with electrical current.
Oh. Just making sure.
Because how does your brain operate? Actually, it operates literally it's chemically produced, but it's an electrical current. Your heart, by the way, operates the same way. It operates also by an electrical current. Okay. Okay, are we decided now? We can move on?
Oh, yeah. I could stay there a long time.
Okay. Okay.
Interesting.
Allusions to the structure of the soul, he says, appear in a variety of scriptural and rabbinic references, and consider these 4 examples. Now he's going to begin to give us a few object lessons. The Hebrew word for mankind is Adam, Aleph, Dalet, Mem in Hebrew. The first letter, Aleph, is the beginning of the Hebrew alphabet. It has the numerical value of 1, okay? And it stands for the lev, for the heart, for the source. The one part of the soul from which the other parts originate, and also where they unite. And this is why I was saying lev really means the unification of all these things. It's the unified source of all of these things. The next letter, Dalet, has the numerical value of 4. And it stands for the other 4 parts of the soul. Okay? That there's a division here. Now, then he says the letter Mem, in this case Mem Sophit, but the letter Mem is the exact middle of the Hebrew Aleph Beit. Now that actually tells us a whole lot of things. But the main thing that the Ramchal, or the Maharal, I'll get the Maharal and the Ramchal separated here in a minute. The main thing that the Maharal is wanting to tell us is that demonstrates that half of those parts of the soul are more spiritual and half of them are more physical, or literally are the connections to the physical. It's extremely interesting what he's actually saying. He is being like a real surgeon here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Our rabbi said, and he quotes from the Talmud in Shabbat 105b, that with reference to the moment of death, this is a very interesting saying that we could spend a lot of time on. One who is present as the soul exits the body is obligated to rend his clothes, to tear his clothes. Why? What is this compared to? They said, why? You know, that's their way of saying, why would you do that? Because this is compared to a Torah scroll which is burned, the leaving of a soul from a body. So just as if you came upon a Torah scroll, a Sefer Torah, which was burning, you would rend your clothes. Also here. Now, so he's saying, so what is the comparison between a soul and a Torah scroll? He says, well, it's very interesting that one point is that the Torah has 5 books, okay? Just as a soul has 5 parts. And not only that, but the 5th book is Devarim, or sometimes it's called Mishneh Torah, the second Torah, the repetition of the Torah, okay? Which is a summary of the whole Torah. He says, and that corresponds to Lev, to the heart, which encompasses all parts of the soul. Now he goes on, he gives another example of why there's something about 5 connected to a soul. The 5 parts of the soul, he says, are also hinted at in the laws of Arachim. Now, which is a method, Arachim, the Talmudic tractate Arachim, has to do with how do you evaluate the monetary amount of a donation to the Holy Temple. Okay? There are rules on how you come about that. When one gives such a donation, he vows to give the erech, which is interesting because erech, aruch, in Hebrew means length, okay? But in this case, it's it's not length, it's value, okay? All right. An erech is the valuation of a specific or a specified individual. That value is based upon the person's age and gender as found in Vayikra, Leviticus 27, 1 through 8. The worth of a youth, of a child, is fixed at 5 shekels weight of silver. There's the 5. But the worth of a man, an adult man, is at 50 shekels, which he says is the adult version of 5. The Torah deems 5 to be the base value because there are 5 components to the human soul. Now, it's very interesting here. Rabbi Basser puts a note. In this case, the Maharal jumped from his dissection of just the nefesh, and he jumps here, in this particular case, talking about the value of a soul, to the other 5 levels of the soul, nefesh, ruach, neshama, and on, okay? And he says, uncharacteristically, the Maharal references these components by their Kabbalistic terms. But that's because he's talking now about something that's totally different. Okay, let's keep going. Scripture portrays the soul through the image. And this is from Mishlei, Proverbs, chapter 20 and verse 27. The lamp of God is the soul of a man. The metaphor calls to mind, now look at this metaphor. It's a beautiful, beautiful metaphor that many of the Kabbalistic rabbis use all the time. In fact, there's a huge, huge level of teaching on this within the Holy Zohar. The metaphor calls to mind how a flame spreads and how a flame splits into different parts. If you ever want to do an interesting meditation sometime, especially in Hanukkah, meditate on the flame and how it's attached to the candle. And there are parts of it that are attached and parts of it that aren't attached. It's very, very interesting. Soul is the same way. That's what he's going to say. It spreads and splits into different parts. Some of them are lower, some of them are higher. The lower parts are closely attached to the wick, while the higher parts are more distant, although still dependent upon the wick and the oil. Even though they don't look even physically connected, they're still connected. It is for this reason that a flame was chosen in Proverbs, in Mishlei, as the metaphor for the soul, half of which is closely linked to the body, and half of which is more spiritual, but still linked. Okay. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, he says, had 5 disciples, and we already know they put primary in here because it's making them crazy, because we all know that Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai had more than 5 disciples. But obviously, the reason it says this is because Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai is wanting to make a point here about something. And the Maharal is saying that on one of the levels, and by the way, just because the Maharal is using this method to dissect this whole idea, that doesn't mean that that's the only lesson that's here, by the way. It doesn't mean it's even close to being the only thing that's coming across here. I remember several years ago, and now I wish I had taken notes because I didn't do it, but I actually sat in a class that I might not even supposed to have been sitting in, but I sat in it anyway, that was actually given by the wife of Rabbi Richmond on these Mishnayot. And she did an unbelievable presentation, but from a whole different perspective than what the Maharal is giving us here. So this is not any kind of exhaustive deal. This is just what the Maharal is seeing, okay? But anyway, 5 disciples, and the question always comes, why these 5? Okay. A person who is highly developed, he says, in one element of the soul, that person will display a particular exemplary character trait as a result. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai observed that of all his disciples, 5 of them manifested a unique, outstanding character trait, epitomizing, in this case, all 5 elements of the human soul. For that reason, the Mishnah provides the apparently obvious detail that there are 5 disciples. The number 5 is specified to convey that these disciples together, they're the epitome of a full personification of a human soul. All right? Now, it says, Hu haya moneh shivchan. He used to count their praises. Very interesting. What does that mean? Why doesn't it say tell? He says, the term enumerate is appropriate rather than tell. because their praises correspond exactly. He's counting the 5 parts. In other words, the Maharal is saying they correspond exactly to the 5 parts of the human soul, and because he listed them in the order of how each part joins with the next. Aha. Now the Maharal is going to get a big lesson from this. He's going to see in the order that they go, this is the way a soul actually is joined together. The parts of it are joined together in a person. What's the time, Jason? Just
5 minutes.
5 minutes. I don't want to waste the 5 minutes. Let's take the 5 minutes. Oh, I don't know about that. No, because we have to start.
Well, you can take a question.
I can take a question. What's the question? What's the question, Tony? You have one? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm full of them tonight. Up here at the top of the page, the lamp of God.
Uh-huh. It's the soul of man.
Soul of man. So what if somebody doesn't have a lamp of God in them? No, serious.
I understand.
You know what
I understand. The better way to say that is that they're upside down. It doesn't necessarily mean that they don't.
have a soul.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean that there's not a lamp. It may very well be completely smothered. To be upside down, okay, let's put this in terminology we can all understand. To be upside down means that you're totally driven by your emotions and by what makes you feel good. All right? You're not driven, you're not directed by the Torah.
Yeah, that's right.
To put it in another way, the way Rabbi Ashlag would put it, the Baal HaSulam, he would say you're totally ruled by your will to receive for yourself alone. In other words, whatever's in it for you. That's to be upside down. It means those emotive powers. And look, a person can be good and be upside down. Okay, you understand? Because the emotive powers are chesed, loving kindness, geverah, strength, severity, tiferet, beauty, but they all deal with particular emotions. By the way, it's very interesting, speaking of B'nai Noach, there are 7 B'nai Noach laws. They correspond exactly to those 7 lower emotive powers of the soul. And the 7 B'nai Noach laws are meant to turn you right side up. That actually, that they bring the control that's needed where you're not run strictly by your will to receive for yourself alone, not just for your emotions, not just for what's in it for me, not just for what makes me feel good. And that's what opens you to the Torah, seriously, which allows you to move on from there. It puts you right side up. Okay? But so it may be being smothered, and I'm sure there are people that as far as anything we can do, they are far beyond what we can do. But I wouldn't even say give up on them. Hashem can do absolutely anything. You understand what I'm saying? Okay. Now, that's one way of putting it. Then there's a whole other way of putting it, of whether we're living as a human being or whether we're living as an animal. Because this also is a part of it also. There are people, you know, some of the rabbis say there are a lot of people who look like human beings, but they're not. They don't mean by that they don't have souls. They mean that they're just so upside down, and they take, you know, the quality of living like an animal actually has to do with, in fact, when we start to develop that, we're worse than an animal. Take, for instance, a suicide bomber. Mm-hmm. Not even an animal does such a thing. Yeah. Okay? Mm-hmm. So there's a sense you can become even worse than an animal. But living on the level of an animal actually is very interesting. That simply means you take everything for granted. Hashem gives us absolutely everything. He gives us this world in which to live. He gives us the air to breathe. He gives us the water to drink. He gives us the food to eat. Everything. Mm-hmm. And we take it for granted because he does the same thing for the animal world. So we don't ask him for these things, and we don't thank him for these things. that's what, when the sages say living on the level of an animal, that's what that really means. Another little interesting thing, but to be upside down. I have to quit. The producer says the time is over. I have to quit. And so that's it. No more questions. Okay. All right. Now, I spent the first 30 minutes just getting us back to where I wanted us to be. So let's spend the next 30 minutes that we're together trying to tackle, boom, 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 some of these things. So shalom uvracha, peace and a blessing. Bye.
Thank you for joining us in our study. If you enjoyed this study and are interested in learning more from the Torah and the sages of Israel, then check us out on the internet at www.bfm101.com, or you may contact us toll-free at 1-800-639-0169. Our mailing address is Biblical Faith, P.O. Box 2, Abilene, Texas 79604. Until next time, we wish you shalom uvracha, peace and a blessing.